Hi, welcome to this video in which I'm going to give you my curated 7 top revision and learning tips. The reason I thought to make this video and give this advice is that I'm an educator with literally years of experience working in the English public education sector, and I have a true passion for sharing the best teaching and learning techniques I've come across over those years. Therefore, this video isn't just going to be hearsay or anecdotal evidence based on one person's experience of learning. Instead, it'll be the culmination of many well-researched avenues looking into how we learn new skills and retain new information most effectively. Whilst I've written chemistry on the sheet in front of you, that's my specialised area, I'm a fervent believer that this advice applies universally to all disciplines and all learners. Let's get started. So my first golden nugget of advice to all students, regardless of whether you're university, school, further education, any learner at any stage, is to make revision active and not passive. Numerous research studies have shown that well-trodden techniques students love to use are actually very low utility and low efficacy. These techniques include classics such as rereading notes, which often elicits little benefit when compared against other techniques. And I'll discuss that a bit later. Another very common approach used by students universally is highlighting and beautifying your notes. And whilst it is a very satisfying experience, it has again been shown through multiple research papers to be low utility, providing only minor boostings to performance for students. And those students usually have sufficient knowledge of how to highlight effectively to make those small gains, which in my mind seems contrary to the whole objective of revision, which is to gain greater insight and experience. And actually some studies have even shown an over-reliance on highlighting use can actually hinder inference making and problem solving, which is fundamental to many subjects' learning processes. The final passive revision technique used by the majority of students is summarising and note-taking. Whilst it's harder for studies and research papers to quantify the efficacy and the impact of this from individual to individual, as we all differ slightly, numerous research studies have shown that this technique is also fundamentally of low utility and effectiveness for student progress and learning. As what they've shown is from school age to undergraduate, all students only benefit marginally from this technique and generally have to be extremely well trained to get any real benefit from extensive note-taking and writing summary notes. All of these techniques are essentially comfort blankets we wrap ourselves up in and create a familiarity fallacy, a vague recollection that falls apart as soon as we try to test or interrogate our knowledge. We know this at our hearts, but yet we try to fool ourselves by thinking it's working. Now, far be it from me to harp on and disparage these revision approaches. In fact, if I'm honest, these are exactly the revision techniques I used at school and uni. And in reality, I can't remember most of the beautifully highlighted leather-bound booklets of notes that I wrote for my biochem and pharmacology courses. It kind of proves it to myself as well that I was falling into that same familiarity fallacy that we all fall into. Instead, I want to focus on active revision, active recall revision methods, and ways to make your consolidation as fun, engaging, and challenging as possible to help create stronger synaptic connections and deeper cognitive understanding. So what I'm going to do is take you through a couple of ideas I've had to create some active recall revision that should help you to build much stronger comprehension of the subjects you are studying. And that includes chemistry. This first technique is known as a memory annotation diagram. Now I really want to emphasize these were not written passively copied from a textbook. These are not beautified summary notes. This is an example of a student who has written these notes from memory. So this is an example of an A-level student who wants to revise the topic benzene from A-level chemistry. Each arrow represents a core strand of that particular topic. You can see this student has really extensive memory of the structure of benzene. They also have a good knowledge of the evidence basis of how we know the benzene structure is as it is and not a Kekulé structure. Don't worry too much about these terms, I'm just giving an example here. What you can see though is the student has come up against a roadblock when they've tried to remember how to draw a mechanism for the reactions of benzene with an electrophile. So clearly this is an area of the topic which they have forgotten about. This is where they would bring in their post-it note. They'd make a note of the fact that they need to revise mechanisms for aromatic compounds, like benzene. Therefore, the student is not, one, passively copying notes from one place to another and not building those new synoptic connections. What the student, on the other hand, is doing is proving to themselves they have a robust comprehension of certain areas of a topic, but also highlighting to themselves gaps and weaknesses that they can target their revision on. Much more effective use of their time, much more effective way of consolidating and working on areas of weakness and strengthening those to become areas of relative strength in the future. The second revision technique I'd like to take you through is called a 6x6 grid. Now this is an example of gamification, trying to make revision a bit more fun, a bit more active, a bit more exciting. So you could play this against a friend if you're both revising the same topic or the same subject. So basically it's a 6x6 grid, you roll 2 dice, you get 2 numbers on the dice, that would be your X and Y coordinates. Go to that particular grid and answer the question in that grid as quickly as possible. Simultaneously, your friend would grab the dice, roll again, get their 2 numbers, try and answer their question as quickly as possible. And you can vary the styles of questions. They can be verbal, they can be pictorial, they can be quite left field, quick fire, more long answer. It's kind of your choice. You need to have already made up some model answers in advance to play the game, which you could do as part of a revision and consolidation memorization process before, a couple of days before the game itself, and then you and your friend can really have a good time actively revising together and make it a competition. See who can get the most right answers first. Every time you roll and then complete an answer, you get to roll again, and the person who answers most quickly and most effectively is the winner. So again, just trying to make revision a bit more interesting is the key. Final active revision technique I'd like to talk about is something I call challenge cue cards. So traditional cue cards are effectively memory cues. You write down key facts about a particular topic, micro scale, minimalized, and then you have it in your pocket, you take it out and you just memorize those facts, or you do cover and reveal. Again, quite a passive process. Instead, imagine doing this. The cue card just has a key term. Say, for example, in chemistry, the key term was polarization. Instead of just having loads of facts written about that particular term, instead I use the word as a springboard to challenge myself, to think about how many connections and how many different ideas I can draw upon that link to this term polarization. So I think deeply and I see what comes back. Straight away I think of, for this term, differences in electronegativity leading to the formation of what we call dipoles. Then I see where that leads me. Well, dipoles makes me think about polar molecules and how we classify molecules as polar. They need to have dipoles that don't cancel out and some level of asymmetry in the molecule. Then I maybe think about where I've come across polarization as a term. Well, I've come across this term when thinking about polarity versus bond enthalpy in determining the rate of hydrolysis reactions in the haloalkane topic. I've also come across it when thinking about the importance of polarization of the carbonate ion in determining the thermal stability of group 2 carbonates. And then again I came across this term when thinking about the influence of polarization by small, highly charged cations on the distortion of the electron cloud around anions in determining the covalent character and therefore the discrepancies in the value and the energies of lattice enthalpies determined using the Born-Haber cycle model. And again, the point here is that all I'm doing is I'm problem solving. I'm drawing on these strands and really interrogating and investigating what I know about the subject I am learning. And that's so much more effective, so much more challenging, so much more engaging than just taking a cue card around and occasionally looking at it. The second key piece of advice regarding revision and effective revision for anybody in any subject is begin with the end in mind. This is taken from Stephen Covey's seminal work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. What this statement is trying to get at is to be proactive rather than reactive. Set your goals, be organized, create a roadmap with a clear schedule. Now's your chance to dust off those discarded highlighters and put them to good use. Design a well-structured revision schedule across multiple weeks or even months. Plan in advance times when you will push revision most intensely and times when you will rest, recuperate and wind down. Be realistic and avoid long, unproductive study periods, twiddling your thumbs in your bedrooms or studies. Plan breaks. Cheers. On average, humans can give full attentive concentration for about 30 to 45 minutes. So incorporate mini breaks to ensure you work smart, not long hours of drudgery which just drag you down and make your revision ineffective. Number 3 on my journey of advice, be positive and embrace a realistic growth mindset. Now this idea is taken from the American psychologist Carol Dweck and her work on the mentality of something known as the growth mindset. She's embracing the idea that you're on a journey of development. With enough time and well-structured practice in the right ways, you can improve your knowledge and proficiency of any subject or skill. Nothing is closed off to you. Nothing is impossible. At this point, I do want to caution a realistic model to avoid unreasonable expectations for yourselves when it comes to the growth mindset. Let me give you a coaching example. If I start running regularly to improve my cardiovascular fitness, I could become a reasonable long distance runner, but I will never be as good as the true athletes. The growth mindset does not trump natural affinity and ability. And that's okay. Sometimes you might find that you have to put in 50% or 75% more effort than others in your classes to get to the same level, because their intrinsic grasp of the subject is slightly stronger than yours. That reality is utterly fine. And understanding yourself as a learner is really important. Don't let that derail your progress and your focus. You will get there if you give it the time it needs and the effort it needs and embrace a realistic growth mindset. Number 4 on my top 7 is, and I like this one kind of like a slogan, don't fear forgetting, fight forgetting. Now, forgetting is an unavoidable consequence of the way our brains function. Neuronal networks only have so much immediately available capacity and plasticity, and you are going to forget large amounts of information all the time across your lives. The embedding of information in our long-term memories, in our hippocampal regions, is aided by repetition of the skills and actions that first helped us to learn that attribute or that knowledge. But what you'll probably find is that those repetitions can become more spaced out as you begin to form stronger and more well-secured neuronal connections. That mastery begins to kick in. It's like riding a bike. Once you've practiced enough times, you can pick up the bike and start riding, even if years have passed, and still know what you're doing. Now the nature of how this is working is illustrated by the forgetting curve shown on the screen in front of you. And a technique called spaced retrieval exploits and acknowledges this pattern to your advantage. Spaced retrieval works by practicing and relearning and testing your knowledge of a key topic at initially quite short intervals after the initial learning, but then at increasingly long intervals following that initial practice until you realize that it's become autonomous and you've probably attained some level of mastery over that particular concept. So it's initially quite intensive and then an increasing level of time spacing for the practice of that skill or attribute. And then all it'll need is short top-ups once you've reached a good level. What is interleaving all about? Let's start with the idea of chunking. Chunking is an idea I'm sure you are all familiar with. Breaking large ideas down to smaller, more manageable pieces. Now, many teachers and students for that matter fall into the habit of approaching learning and teaching of a new topic through something called blocked practice. What that means is, yes, absolutely breaking down the topic into pieces, chunking. Once you've gone through the whole topic, you then move on to the next. You may even approach your revision in exactly the same way, covering it topic by topic. However, research suggests that interleaving practice holds significant benefits. This involves learning or consolidating your learning by mixing topic areas together. This might sound counterintuitive, but consider it like this. Interleaving means you aren't learning or reviewing ideas in perfect isolation. Instead, your brain gets used to performing connections and seeing the bigger picture. This higher order thinking, a more analytical approach, makes your knowledge and learning both more flexible and more resilient in nature, and you will be a stronger learner for it. Revision top tip number 5, learn from the testing effect. Now, this idea was inspired by excellent work summarized in David Didale's book, What If Everything We Know About Education Was Wrong? Now, in his book, David very succinctly and eloquently outlines the evidence that regular, low-stakes testing, which includes things like quizzes and low-pressure mini-assessments, have a large positive impact upon student performances and outcomes in high-stakes, internal and even external public examinations. Think of it like this. Imagine the term study in my 2 diagrams here was all about the theory of taking a penalty kick, the technique, the geometry of the shot, the biomechanics, how to aim, how to bluff the goalie. But the low stakes testing was actually the practice of actually physically taking a penalty kick against a friendly goalie. Now, of my 2 players, which player is more likely to step up to the plate and score a goal? The player who did all the study and then took the penalty kick or the high stakes test, or the player who did the fundamental core basic study of the biomechanics and the theory of penalty kicks, took plenty of low pressure penalty kicks against a friendly goalie, and then had his shot. Hopefully, it isn't rocket science, and it kind of makes sense that player 2, who embraced the testing effect, is much more likely to score a goal than player 1, who did a lot more studying, but never really exposed themselves to anything like that penalty kick at the end. Revision technique number 6, use the Tricolore past paper completion method. And this particular revision technique is from, well, me. Obviously, the tricolor flag is the tricolour flag of France. So what I'm talking about here is using 3 different colours of pen when going through any past paper in any subject. What are the 3 colours for? Let me explain. Firstly, you complete the past paper under exam conditions, following plenty of revision, using 1 colour of pen. Then you have a little break. As I said, it's always important to make sure you're refreshed. You come back to the paper, this time with an open textbook, all your study notes and the support materials you have available. And you fill in any gaps you've left and make any corrections you feel you need to the answers you've given, but you make sure you do this in a second different colour pen to the first you used. That's really important because now you can see what you knew off the top of your head from revision and then what you need to improve upon in a different colour. Finally, using the mark scheme and any examiner's reports available, mark your paper and add further corrections, improvements in a 3rd colour. Then you can see not only what you knew, what you didn't know, but how to elevate and evolve your answers to the highest level possible and to reach the examiner's expectations. And this will make you a much stronger practitioner with much better exam technique than if you just did it with 1 colour. Finally, we've reached revision top tip number 7. This one's actually a quote, and it comes from a pretty unusual source. It's from the former US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. And the actual quote is in reference to the government of US failing to find links between the government of Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. I've taken it out of context because I want to use it for a different purpose than he did. But it says this: but there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know we don't know. And actually, I really like that, because that's exactly what you guys will be facing. You need to know yourselves as learners. You need to discover not just what you don't know, but what you don't know you don't know. And that only comes through an active interrogation, exploration, and discovery process, where you delve deep into your learning, you open up all avenues, and you find out the areas you just don't know anything about. And that's where you work the hardest to fill in those gaps, and then you will be more successful as learners. So I hope with those 7 top tips in place, it'll really help you, whoever you are, to be a lifelong learner and to embrace revision as an active, enjoyable and positive process. I know things have been tough. It's been a weird couple of years, but I really hope that this helps anybody watching to master their studies in any subject and to become more effective learners and people who enjoy learning, because it's such a great thing to have knowledge, because it really enriches our life experiences. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this video, please do check out other videos on the channel, and don't forget to give it a like. Think about subscribing to the channel, and maybe even ring the bell to keep notified of our future content. You could even think about sharing information about this channel with other people, friends who might need some help in chemistry. I love helping people with their studies, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks very much for listening to the end. Take care. Bye now.